Can a conventional Democrat beat a populist Republican? Trump is a populist Republican. Or do we need a populist Democrat? Your thoughts, your comments, leave your comments, ding the bell, and please subscribe to our channel.
This hour, I want to raise this question that really I think Joe Biden has raised in the way that he's been talking about the Republican Party. And, you know, basically what he's been saying is that the problem in the United States, the problem with our governance, our government, the problem of you know, Trump and all this kind of stuff, that problem is just one guy, Donald Trump. And the rest of the Republican Party is just fine. Joe Biden said, limit it to, this is from a piece by Shane Goldmacher in Friday's New York Times. Biden thinks Trump is the problem, not Republicans. Other Democrats disagree. Limit it to 4 years, Biden pleaded with a ballroom crowd of 600 in the eastern city of Dubuque. History will treat this administration's time as an aberration. He added, this is not the Republican Party. My Republican friends, he talked about his relationship with my Republican friends in the House and Senate. You know, now, there are other Democrats, and in the article they quote Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, but I would say it's probably much deeper than that among the Democratic field, who say, no, Donald Trump is not the problem. Donald Trump is the symptom of the problem. The problem is that the Republican Party has been taken over by a group of libertarian billionaires who don't believe in government. They don't believe in the American way. They want a government that you know, doesn't have public schools, that doesn't have the commons, that basically just is the military, the judiciary, and the police, and that's it. And you know, so the question that is asked in this New York Times piece is: do Democrats want a bipartisan dealmaker promising a return to normalcy, which is basically Biden's pitch, and you know, I think a few other people. Probably Amy Klobuchar is and Michael Bennet. I mean, and John Hickenlooper, some of these guys, and perhaps Pete Buttigieg. We know so little about his actual policies, but basically they have all campaigned on, I can work across the aisle, I can work with Democrats. Do we want a bipartisan dealmaker, or do we want a partisan warrior who's going to say, no, we need transformational change in America, which, by the way, is what Republicans have been saying since 1988, or since 1980. That was Reagan's pitch. We're going to change America. We're going to undo the New Deal. The New Deal went way too far, and Social Security needs to be privatized, and Medicare needs to be cut in half. And we need to drill holes in Medicare. We need to create a 20% exclusion to Medicare so that private health insurance companies can come in and supplement Medicare. We need to create a private Medicare system, Medicare Advantage. I mean, these were all things that Reagan came up with, you know, as ways to destroy the New Deal. He was a transformational president. Not in a way I like or want, but he was a genuinely transformational president, and the United States has not changed. We are still in this Reaganism era. So do we want a transformational president who's going to set their sights on destroying Reaganism and taking us back to FDR Americanism? Or do we want a guy who is going to, like our last two Democratic presidents, basically try to negotiate deals with Republicans and compromise? Bernie Sanders says, make no mistake about it, this struggle is not just about defeating Donald Trump. This struggle is about taking on the incredibly powerful institutions that control the economic and political life of this country. But, as the New York Times points out, in the Obama White House, Biden was known as the McConnell whisperer for his skills in striking agreements with the often recalcitrant Senate Republican leader, Mitch McConnell. Mr. Biden spent decades cutting deals in the Senate. Jimmy Stumpf, who is was at a Biden rally, says, I just want to see decency again. Yet many on the left believe that Biden's nostalgia for a bygone era of comedy, compromise, and civility, while appealing, is misplaced or even naive. Brian Fallon, former top spokesperson for Hillary Clinton, and Chuck Schumer said Joe Biden knows better. But because Biden was the wingman for Barack Obama, who in his first year of his presidency had Mitch McConnell say his #1 objective was that Barack Obama wasn't reelected, he definitely should know better. So which kind of Democrat do we want? You know, Elizabeth Warren, she said the final results may have divided us. She's talking about the 2016 election. But our entire electorate embraced deep fundamental reform of our economic system and our political system. This is not what the moderates on the Democratic side are advocating. So, you know, what are we, right? And this whole electability thing, and there's been some great writing about how electability really means male. But this whole electability, and I think Hillary Clinton demonstrated, certainly at the congressional level, women all over this country have demonstrated that women can get elected just as easily and do just as good a job as men, and frankly, I'd say in many cases a better job. And I think Hillary Clinton demonstrated that a woman can be elected president of the United States. She got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump did. And if it wasn't for election rigging by voter suppression in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and maybe a few other things, she would be in the White House right now. Egberto Willies, writing over at Daily Kos, Democrats must nominate a populist if they're to win the White House and Congress. This is the question. Can a populist beat Donald Trump? Donald Trump is a populist. He's a right-wing populist. Can a left-wing populist beat a right-wing populist, or do you need a left-wing, middle-of-the-road compromise guy to be, you know, or let's say business as usual guy, a return to normalcy, which, by the way, was the campaign slogan of Warren Harding in 1920, a return to normalcy. And what he meant by that was dropping the top income tax rate, which had gone up to 95%. And sure enough, he did. He dropped it down to 25% in 1921. But in any case, the example that Egberto Willies points out is the 7th District congressional race in Texas, where in 2018, there was a progressive on the campaign, in the Democratic campaign. Her name was Lizzie Pennell Fletcher. And maybe I've got this wrong. It is more likely an increasingly progressive vote provided the winning margin in these elections. This reality was apparent in the Texas Congressional District 7, where the DCCC interjected themselves in our local election with a right-wing style attack on Laura Mosier, who ultimately lost to Lizzie Pennell Fletcher. All the progressive groups coalesced around Fletcher, block walking, knocking on doors, phone banking, because they kept their eyes on the ball. So, you know, apparently Mosier was a little more progressive, but the DCCC took her out. When American pollsters give Americans choices of policies, they reveal themselves as progressives. But the powers that be hoodwink them into believing the things that they want are unattainable. Worse, their leaders tell them that their wants would cost jobs or hurt the economy. In other words, fear is responsible for most Americans sticking to the mythical center. And now here we've got Nancy Pelosi. Don't get dragged, you know, this is essentially what she's saying. Glenn Thrush writing about this in the New York Times on Friday. Don't get dragged into a protracted impeachment bid. Don't risk alienating moderate voters who flocked to the party in 2018 by drifting too far to the left. Nancy Pelosi said, own the center left, own the mainstream. Well, yeah, the mainstream is, quote, center left. But what does center mean? I mean, increasingly, it's looking to me like center means just fine to go along with big corporations and take money from billionaires. And I don't think most Americans are there. I don't understand. You know, I hear these people, particularly on MSNBC and CNN, I hear these people talking about, well, we need to go to the center. What the hell are they talking about? I mean, literally, what do they mean? What specific policy is the center? Well, okay, here's an example. Medicare for All is the far left. Medicare X is the center. What does Medicare X do? Or this other, I mean, there's two different versions of Medicare as a public option, basically. And both of them would keep in place the 20% hole in Medicare that brings in private health insurance companies and makes a hell of a lot of profit for those private health insurance companies. All of them keep in place Medicare Advantage, which is privatization of Medicare, which is now 1/3 privatized. 1/3 of Americans who are on Medicare are taking Medicare Advantage, which is not actually Medicare. It's a private corporate scheme that is heavily subsidized with our tax dollars and our Medicare dollars. But the sales pitch for it is, it'll be a lot easier to sell to Americans that they won't have to give up their health insurance policy. There's probably a lot of truth to that. So is that an example of a compromise that's a good compromise? If you leave the health insurance companies in place, if you allow them to continue their lobbying, if you allow them to continue their bad behavior? Maybe. Maybe. But I'm personally of the opinion that it's going to take a real progressive populist to beat a conservative populist.